The scream of a wounded horse pierced the night air, and Beatrice Lancaster dropped the butter-churn dasher as she ran toward the stable, her nightgown catching the pale moonlight streaming across her father's ranch in the Colorado Territory. She pushed open the stable door to find their prize mare thrashing in her stall, foam flecking her dark coat, while her younger brother Thomas stood helplessly to the side, his face white with panic. Beatrice moved quickly, her hands steady despite her racing heart, speaking in low, soothing tones as she examined the animal. The mare had gotten tangled in broken fence wire, deep gashes marking her flank, and Beatrice knew she had precious little time before infection could set in. "Thomas, get me the medical kit from the house and wake Papa," Beatrice commanded, her voice calm despite the urgency. Her brother disappeared into the night while she continued working to calm the frightened animal. At 22 years old, Beatrice had grown up on this ranch outside Animas Forks, Colorado, learning from her father how to handle horses, mend fences, and run a homestead in this unforgiving landscape. Her mother had died bringing Thomas into the world 14 years ago, leaving Beatrice to become both daughter and surrogate mother, ranch hand and homemaker. The mare finally settled under her touch, and Beatrice carefully began extracting the wire from the wounds. She worked by the light of a single lantern, her dark blonde hair falling loose from its braid, her hands moving with practiced precision. The ranch had been struggling lately with rustlers in the area, and they couldn't afford to lose any more livestock. Her father, Benjamin Lancaster, had taken out a loan from the bank in Silverton to expand their herd 2 years ago, betting on the mining boom bringing more business to the region. The bet had paid off initially, but now with cattle disappearing and the added expense of hiring ranch hands they could barely afford, the Lancasters were facing the possibility of losing everything. Thomas returned with their father, who limped into the stable, his leg still bothering him from a break that had never quite healed right. Benjamin Lancaster surveyed the scene, his weathered face creasing with concern as he watched his daughter work. "How bad is it?" he asked, moving closer despite his injury. "Could be worse," Beatrice replied, cleaning the wounds with steady hands. "She'll need watching through the night, and we'll have to keep her still for at least a week while these heal, if infection sets in." She didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what it would mean. Her father nodded slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'll stay with her. You've got enough to do come morning. Papa, you need your rest. That leg won't heal if you keep pushing yourself." Beatrice looked up at him, her blue eyes reflecting the lamplight. "I can manage here." "Stubborn as your mother," Benjamin said, but there was affection in his voice. "Fine, but you wake me if anything changes." After her father and brother returned to the house, Beatrice settled onto a stool beside the mare's stall, speaking softly to keep the animal calm. The night was cool for August, 1882, and she found herself grateful for the shawl she'd thrown over her nightgown. The ranch sat at a high elevation, nestled in a valley where the San Juan Mountains rose like sentinels around them. Beautiful country, but harsh and unforgiving to those who weren't prepared for its challenges. Hours passed, and the mare remained stable. Beatrice found her eyelids growing heavy despite her determination to stay alert. She thought about the chores waiting for her come morning, the butter that still needed churning, the bread that needed baking, the garden that required tending. Thomas helped where he could, but he was still young and her father's injury had shifted more responsibility onto her shoulders. They needed to hire another ranch hand, but money was tight and most men passing through were either heading to the mines or running from something. The sound of the stable door opening made Beatrice jump to her feet, her heart hammering. It was well past midnight, and visitors at this hour rarely meant anything good. "Easy there," came a man's voice, low and calm. "Saw your light burning and wanted to make sure everything was all right." Beatrice grabbed a pitchfork leaning against the wall, holding it defensively. "Who are you and what are you doing on our property?" The man stepped into the light, hands raised to show he meant no harm. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard stubble on his jaw. His clothes were dusty from travel, and he wore a gun belt low on his hips, but his brown eyes held no threat as he looked at her. "Name's William Dawson," he said. "I rode in from Durango this evening looking for work. Stopped to make camp down by your creek for the night. Heard the commotion earlier, and when I saw your light still on, figured I'd check if you needed help." "We're fine," Beatrice said, not lowering the pitchfork. "And that creek is on Lancaster property, so you're trespassing." William nodded slowly. "You'd be right about that, and I apologize. I'll move on come first light." He turned to leave, then paused. "That mare of yours, though, if those wounds aren't treated proper, you'll lose her." "I know how to care for my own animals, Mr. Dawson." "Didn't say you didn't." He glanced at the horse, then back at Beatrice. "But I worked for a veterinarian down in Texas before I came north. Learned a fair bit about treating injuries like that. If you want, I could take a look, make sure you've got everything you need. No charge, just trying to be neighborly." Beatrice studied him for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential benefit. Her father had always taught her to trust her instincts about people, and something about William Dawson seemed genuine despite the circumstances. Still, a woman alone in a stable with a strange man in the middle of the night was a recipe for trouble. "You can look," she said finally, "but the pitchfork stays in my hands." A slight smile crossed William's face. "Fair enough." He approached the mare slowly, making soft, clicking sounds with his tongue. The horse's ears pricked forward, and she allowed him to examine her without fuss. Beatrice watched as he ran his hands over the wounds she'd cleaned, his touch gentle but thorough. "You did good work here," he said after a moment. "Real good. But you'll want to pack these with honey if you've got it. Keeps infection out better than anything else I've found. And this one here," he indicated a deeper gash near the mare's hip, "needs stitching. Without it, she'll tear it open every time she moves." "I know it needs stitching," Beatrice said, frustration creeping into her voice. "But I've never done it before." "My father has, but his hands shake too much now from an old injury." William looked at her thoughtfully. "I could do it if you'd trust me to. I've stitched up more horses than I can count." Beatrice wanted to refuse on principle. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him. But the mare needed help, and William was right about the wound. If it didn't get stitched properly, they'd lose the horse for certain. "All right," she said finally, "but I'll be watching every move you make." Wouldn't expect anything less from a woman standing in her nightgown holding a pitchfork like she knows how to use it. Heat rushed to Beatrice's cheeks as she suddenly remembered her state of undress. The shawl covered most of her, but it was still improper. "Don't you dare make light of this situation, Mr. Dawson." "Wasn't making light, miss." "Lancaster, Beatrice Lancaster, Miss Lancaster." He nodded respectfully. "Just stating a fact. You've got more courage than most men I've met. Now, you got a needle and thread suited for this kind of work." Beatrice directed him to where they kept their animal medical supplies, and William set to work. She watched as he carefully stitched the deepest wound, his hands steady and sure. He spoke softly to the mare throughout the process, keeping her calm despite what must have been considerable pain. There was something mesmerizing about watching him work, the focused competence in his movements, the gentleness in his voice. "Where did you say you learned to do this?" Beatrice asked, curiosity getting the better of her caution. "Worked for a man named Dr. Patterson in San Antonio. He took me on as a stable hand when I was 16, taught me everything he knew about treating animals. Spent 6 years with him before he passed last spring." William's voice held a note of sadness. "After he died, his daughter sold the practice, and I decided it was time to see some new country." "Why Colorado?" "Heard there was opportunity up here with the mining towns. Figured ranches would need hands, and I know my way around cattle and horses both." He finished the last stitch and stepped back to examine his work. "That should hold. Keep her still like you planned, change the dressing daily, and watch for signs of fever. She's a strong animal, should pull through just fine." "Thank you," Beatrice said, and meant it. She finally lowered the pitchfork. "I'm sorry for being so suspicious. We've had trouble with rustlers lately, and a woman can't be too careful. No need to apologize. You were right to be cautious." William gathered the medical supplies and returned them to their proper place. "I'll be on my way now. Let you get some rest." "Wait." The word left Beatrice's mouth before she'd fully thought it through. "You said you were looking for work. We need a ranch hand. The pay isn't much, but it comes with meals and a place in the bunkhouse." William turned to face her, surprise evident on his face. "You offering me a job, Miss Lancaster? I'm saying you should come by tomorrow morning and talk to my father. What he decides is up to him, but I'll put in a good word based on what you did here tonight." Beatrice pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Fair warning, though, we're a small operation and we've been having problems with theft. It might not be the safest position." "I've handled trouble before," William said, "and I appreciate the opportunity. I'll be here at first light." After he left, Beatrice returned to her vigil beside the mare. She found herself thinking about William Dawson, wondering about his story. There had been a sadness in his eyes when he mentioned Dr. Patterson, the kind of grief that came from losing someone important. She understood that feeling all too well. Her mother's death had left a hole in their family that had never quite filled, and watching her father struggle with his injury, and the burden of keeping the ranch afloat, had added its own weight to her shoulders. Dawn broke with its usual spectacular display, painting the mountain peaks in shades of gold and pink. Beatrice had dozed fitfully through the remaining hours, waking periodically to check on the mare. The horse seemed stable, eating a bit of grain and drinking water when offered, which Beatrice took as encouraging signs. She made her way to the house as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, finding her father already up and making coffee in the kitchen. Thomas sat at the table, half asleep over a bowl of porridge. "How's the mare?" Benjamin asked, handing Beatrice a cup of coffee. "Better. The worst wound needed stitching, which brings me to something I need to discuss with you." Beatrice wrapped her hands around the warm cup, gathering her thoughts. "A man came by last night, said he was camping down by our creek and saw the light in the stable. He offered to help with the mare, and Papa, he knew what he was doing. Worked for a veterinarian down in Texas." Her father's expression grew cautious. "A stranger showed up in the middle of the night and you let him near our horse." "I had a pitchfork on him the whole time," Beatrice said defensively. "And I used my judgment. He did good work, Papa, probably saved the mare's life. More importantly, he said he's looking for ranch work. I told him to come by this morning to speak with you." Benjamin Lancaster studied his daughter's face, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll hear what he has to say, but B, you need to be more careful. These are dangerous times, and a man who appears in the middle of the night could be anyone." "I know, Papa, but my instincts say he's genuine. You'll see when you meet him." William appeared at the ranch house just after sunrise, as promised. He'd cleaned up some, though his clothes were still worn from travel. Benjamin invited him into the kitchen, and Beatrice busied herself at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon while listening to the two men talk. "Miss Lancaster mentioned you worked for a veterinarian," Benjamin said, getting straight to the point. Yes, sir. Dr. Benjamin Patterson in San Antonio. I started with him when I was 16, worked there until he passed 6 months ago. He taught me about treating animals, both large and small. Before that, I grew up on a cattle ranch outside Houston. My father was a foreman there until he died when I was 15. You know your way around ranch work then? Yes, sir. Can ride, rope, brand, mend fences, break horses, pretty much anything that needs doing. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. I'll be straight with you, Mr. Dawson. This ranch is struggling. We've been losing cattle to rustlers, my leg is giving me trouble, and I'm behind on a bank loan. I can offer you $30 a month, 3 meals a day, and a bunk in the stable loft. It's not much, and there's a chance we might lose this place before winter comes. I appreciate the honesty, sir. William met Benjamin's gaze steadily. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'm not afraid of trouble if it comes to that. I'd be grateful for the opportunity. Can you use that gun you're wearing? Well enough. I'm not looking for gunfights, but I can defend myself and what's mine if needed. Benjamin glanced at Beatrice, who nodded slightly, then extended his hand to William. All right then. You're hired. We'll give it a month trial, see how things work out. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. After breakfast, Beatrice showed William around the ranch while her father rested his leg and Thomas headed out to check the fence lines. The Lancaster spread covered about 300 acres of valley land with decent grazing and access to water from the creek that ran through it. They ran about 100 head of cattle, plus the horses and some chickens. It was a modest operation, but it could provide a good living if managed well, and if they could stop the bleeding from rustler activity. We've lost 15 head in the past 2 months, Beatrice explained as they walked toward the cattle grazing in the far pasture. They come at night, take just a few at a time so it's not immediately obvious. My father reported it to the sheriff in Silverton, but they're spread thin with all the mining camps and haven't been able to catch anyone. Any idea who's behind it? There's a larger ranch about 10 miles south of here. Man named Garrett Cole runs it. He's been trying to buy our land for the past year, made several offers that my father refused. Papa thinks Cole might be behind the rustling, trying to pressure us into selling, but he can't prove it. William's jaw tightened. That's a coward's way of doing business. That's what I think too. But without proof, there's nothing we can do. Beatrice pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, squinting against the morning sun. We've been taking turns staying up at night, keeping watch, but there's too much ground to cover and we're all exhausted. What if we set a trap? Let them think we're not watching, but be ready for them. Beatrice looked at him with interest. What did you have in mind? Give me a few days to learn the lay of the land, see their patterns. Then we'll come up with a plan. They spent the rest of the morning working together, with Beatrice showing William where everything was kept and explaining the daily routines. She found herself enjoying his company more than she'd expected. He listened carefully when she spoke, asked good questions, and didn't condescend to her the way some men did when a woman knew about ranch work. There was an easy competence about him that inspired confidence, and more than once she caught herself watching the way he moved, the strength in his hands as he worked. By midday, William had settled into the routine like he'd been there for months rather than hours. Beatrice returned to the house to catch up on her own chores, the butter churning that had been interrupted the previous night still waiting for her. She set up the churn on the back porch where it was cooler, working the dasher up and down in a steady rhythm while her mind wandered. She thought about the ranch, about her father's worry lines that seemed to deepen daily, about Thomas, who deserved a chance to go to school instead of spending all his time doing ranch work. She thought about her own life, about how the years seemed to slip by while she focused on keeping their small family afloat. At 22, most women her age were married with children of their own. Beatrice had received a few proposals over the years, but none from men she could imagine spending her life with. The isolated nature of their ranch meant she didn't meet many eligible men, and the few she did meet seemed to expect a wife who would be content staying in the house while the men handled everything of importance. Beatrice had no interest in being that kind of wife. She loved the ranch, loved working with the animals and watching things grow. She wanted a partner, not a master. So far, no such man had appeared in her life, and she'd resigned herself to the possibility that she might remain unmarried. It wasn't the worst fate. She had her family, her home, her work. It would have to be enough. The sun had reached its zenith when she heard footsteps on the porch. She looked up to find William approaching, his hat in his hands. "Your father said you might have some lunch ready," he said. "But if this is a bad time, I can wait." "No, come in. I have stew left from yesterday that just needs heating." Beatrice stood, brushing off her skirt. She changed into her work clothes after breakfast, a simple brown dress that had seen better days but was practical for ranch work. William followed her into the kitchen, and Beatrice busied herself with preparing food. She was acutely aware of his presence in the small space, the way he seemed to fill the room with his quiet energy. He washed his hands at the basin, and she noticed the care he took, the methodical way he approached even this simple task. "Your father's resting," William said as she set a bowl of stew in front of him. "His leg was bothering him, so I sent him up for a nap. Thomas and I can handle things this afternoon." "You're not his boss, Mr. Dawson," Beatrice said, but there was no heat in her words. She was actually grateful that someone else had convinced her stubborn father to rest. "No, madam, but I am hired help, and part of my job is taking some of the burden off your family." He took a bite of the stew, then looked at her with appreciation. "This is excellent. Thank you. My mother's recipe." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before William spoke again. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you run a tight operation here. Everything's organized, well maintained. That takes skill and dedication. My father taught me everything I know. He's a good man, a good rancher. This trouble with the rustlers and his injury, it's been hard on him. He blames himself for not being able to do more." Beatrice stared into her bowl. "I wish I could do more to help. Seems to me you're doing plenty. From what I've seen, this place would fall apart without you." The compliment warmed her more than it probably should have. "Well, we all do what needs doing. Still, it's impressive. Most women I've known wouldn't have the first idea how to run a ranch." "Most women aren't given the chance to learn," Beatrice countered. "They're perfectly capable if someone takes the time to teach them." William studied her with those thoughtful brown eyes. "You're probably right about that. My mother was the same way, always said women were tougher than men gave them credit for. She had to be, raising 4 boys mostly on her own while my father worked the ranch." "4 boys. Where are they now?" "Scattered. My oldest brother Nathaniel joined the army. Last I heard he was stationed in Arizona. James, the second oldest, went to California during the gold rush and never came back. Daniel, he's closest to my age. He's working on a ranch in New Mexico. We write when we can, but it's been a while." There was a wistfulness in his voice. "Life pulls people in different directions. Do you miss them?" "Every day. But that's the way of things, isn't it? You grow up, you move on, you make your own path." "What about your mother?" William's expression darkened. "She passed 4 years ago. Pneumonia took her one winter. That's when I left Houston, went to work for Dr. Patterson. Couldn't stand being at the ranch without her there." "I'm sorry. I lost my mother too 14 years ago. She died in childbirth with Thomas." That's a heavy burden for a child to carry. I was 8, old enough to remember her, young enough that sometimes the memories feel like dreams. Beatrice stood to clear the dishes, needing something to do with her hands. But Thomas is a good brother, and I wouldn't trade him for anything. You don't blame the living for the cost of their birth. Sounds like your mother raised you right in the time she had. They fell into a pattern over the following days, a rhythm of work and shared meals and gradually building trust. William proved himself invaluable around the ranch, handling tasks that had been piling up due to Benjamin's injury. He repaired the broken fence that had injured the mare, mended the roof on the chicken coop, and spent hours working with a young stallion that had been too wild for anyone else to handle. Beatrice found herself looking forward to their conversations, the way he asked her opinion on things rather than just telling her how things should be done. A week after William's arrival, Beatrice was up late again, this time deliberately churning butter by moonlight. The days had been hot, and she'd found that working in the cooler night air was more pleasant. She'd set up her churn on a flat area behind the barn where she could see the mountains silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The dasher moved up and down in steady rhythm, a meditation of sorts that allowed her mind to wander. She was thinking about William, if she was honest with herself. Thinking about the way he smiled when he was pleased with something, the rare moments when his serious expression broke into laughter. Thinking about how he treated her like an equal, how he'd asked her advice that afternoon about the best way to treat a cow with an infected hoof. She'd given her opinion, he'd tried it, and it had worked. Such a small thing, but it had made her feel valued in a way she wasn't accustomed to. Lost in thought, she didn't hear him approach until he spoke. That's hard work for this late at night. Beatrice looked up, startled to find William standing a few feet away. He must have been making rounds, checking on the livestock. It's cooler now than during the day. The butter sets better. Mind if I join you? It's a free country, Mr. Dawson. I wish you'd call me William. Mr. Dawson makes me feel old. All right, William, and you can call me Beatrice or Bea if you prefer. He moved closer, watching her work. My mother used to churn butter. Always said it was boring work. It is somewhat, but there's something peaceful about it too. A good time to think. What do you think about? The question was innocent enough, but there was something in his tone that made her heart beat a little faster. Everything. Nothing. The ranch mostly. Wondering if we'll manage to keep it. William was quiet for a moment, then reached out. May I? She didn't understand at first, then realized he was offering to take over the churning. You don't have to do that, I know, but why should you have all the fun? There was a teasing note in his voice that made her smile. She stepped back, letting him take her place at the churn. He began working the dasher and she watched, amused. After a minute, she found herself unconsciously swaying to the rhythm of his movements. You know, William said, in some places they say churning butter is like a dance. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern, a dance. That's a strange way to think about chores. Maybe, but strange doesn't mean wrong. He changed the rhythm slightly, making it more deliberate, almost musical. See. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Beatrice laughed despite herself. You're being ridiculous. Am I? He continued the pattern, his movements exaggerated now, almost theatrical. Come on, dance with me while I work. Make this boring chore into something more interesting. I don't dance, William. Sure you do. Everyone can dance if they let themselves. He kept working the churn, but his movements had taken on a quality that was almost performance, his whole body getting into the rhythm. Just sway with the beat, nothing fancy. It was absurd, utterly ridiculous. But something about the moonlight and his earnest playfulness made Beatrice throw caution aside. She began to sway, matching her movements to the rhythm of the churn. William's face broke into a wide grin, encouraging her. There you go, see? Natural dancer. "This is insane," Beatrice said, but she was laughing now, really laughing in a way she hadn't in months. The tension that had been coiled tight in her chest loosened, and she let herself simply be in the moment, swaying and spinning slowly while William worked the butter churn like it was a musical instrument. He started humming a tune, something low and melodic that fit the rhythm perfectly. Beatrice found herself humming along, their voices blending in the night air. The mountains watched their foolishness with ancient patience. The stars bore witness to this small moment of joy stolen from worry and hardship. When the butter was finally finished, they were both breathing hard and grinning like children. William pulled the dasher out, checking the consistency. "Perfect butter made with dancing. Think it'll taste different. It'll taste like madness," Beatrice said, but she couldn't stop smiling. "What possessed you to do that? You looked like you needed to laugh, and honestly, I did too." He met her eyes in the moonlight, his expression growing more serious. "Life's hard enough without forgetting how to find joy in the small things. When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise, B. Just tired of being sad all the time. After Dr. Patterson died, I spent months going through the motions, feeling like nothing mattered much. Then I came here and I don't know, something's different, better." His voice dropped lower. "Being here with your family, working on this ranch, it's made me remember what it feels like to be part of something again." Beatrice's breath caught in her chest. She knew she should step back, should maintain proper distance, but she found herself moving closer instead. "William, I know this isn't appropriate," he said quietly. "I know I'm hired help and you're the rancher's daughter and there are about 100 reasons why I shouldn't say anything. But B, these past days working alongside you, talking with you, I've been happier than I've been in years. I needed you to know that." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I've felt it too, this connection between us. I didn't want to admit it, didn't want to complicate things, but I can't seem to help it. What do we do about it? I don't know. Nothing, maybe, everything, I'm not sure." She looked up at him, at the way the moonlight caught in his dark hair, the intensity in his eyes. "My father needs you here. The ranch needs you. I don't want to do anything that might jeopardize that. I'm not going anywhere, B. No matter what happens between us or doesn't happen, I gave my word I'd help your family and I keep my word. But what if things got complicated? What if we started something and it didn't work out? It would be awkward, difficult. Or what if we started something and it did work out?" William's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What if this feeling between us is real and worth exploring? Are we going to let fear keep us from finding out?" Beatrice knew she should be practical, should think about all the ways this could go wrong. But standing there in the moonlight with William looking at her like she was something precious, all her careful reasoning seemed to dissolve. She'd spent so much of her life being responsible, being the one who kept everything together. Maybe just this once she could let herself take a chance. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I've never had time for courting or romance. It wasn't part of my life." "Then we'll figure it out together. Nice and slow, no pressure. I just want the chance to know you better, B, to see where this could go. We have to be careful. My father can't know, not yet. He has enough to worry about. Fair enough, this can be just between us for now." William's hand was still near her face, and Beatrice found herself leaning into his touch. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand, strong and gentle at the same time. Her eyes drifted closed for a moment, savoring the simple contact. "I should get back to the house," she whispered, but she didn't move. "You should," William agreed, but he didn't step back either. They stood there for a long moment, the space between them charged with possibility, with the promise of something neither of them quite dared to name yet. Finally, Beatrice forced herself to step back, breaking the spell. "Good night, William." Good night, Bee. Sweet dreams. She carried the butter back to the house, her thoughts swirling. What was she doing? She'd known this man for barely over a week, and here she was letting him into her heart. It was reckless, impractical, possibly foolish. But it also felt right in a way that made her pulse quicken and her spirit lift. For the first time in years, she felt like something beyond the ranch existed for her, something personal and full of promise. The next morning brought news that drove all thoughts of romance from everyone's minds. Thomas came racing back from checking the far pasture, his face flushed with anger and fear. They hit us again. 10 head this time, Papa. 10. And they left a note. Benjamin took the paper from his son's trembling hand, his face darkening as he read. He handed it to William without a word. Beatrice, read over William's shoulder. Stop being stubborn. Sell while you still can. Next time it won't just be cattle. The words were printed in rough block letters. That's a direct threat, William said, his voice hard. We need to contact the sheriff. By the time the sheriff gets here from Silverton, the trail will be cold, Benjamin said bitterly. And we already know who's behind this. Garrett Cole wants this land, and he's not above using intimidation to get it. Then we confront him directly, William suggested. No, Benjamin's tone was firm. That's exactly what he wants, an excuse to escalate. If we go there making accusations we can't prove, someone will end up hurt or dead. I won't risk my family that way. So what do? Just let him steal from us until there's nothing left. Beatrice could hear the frustration in her own voice. Papa, we can't keep absorbing these losses. I know that, Bee. Believe me, I know. Her father looked older suddenly, worn down by troubles he couldn't fix. I'll go to the bank, see if I can extend the loan, buy us some more time. Let me scout Cole's ranch, William said, just to look around, see what I can see. If we can find proof he's got our cattle, we'd have grounds to bring the law in. Benjamin considered this, then nodded reluctantly. All right, but you're just looking, William. No heroics, no confrontations. Clear? Clear. William left that afternoon, saying he'd be back by dark. Beatrice threw herself into work, trying not to worry, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Cole was known to be ruthless, and his ranch hands were more hired guns than cowboys. If William was caught snooping around, there was no telling what might happen to him. The day dragged endlessly. Beatrice cooked, cleaned, tended the garden, fed the chickens, and tried to keep busy. Thomas sensed her mood and kept his distance, working on mending tack in the barn. Benjamin rode to Silverton to meet with the banker, leaving Beatrice alone with her increasingly dark thoughts. What if William didn't come back? What if Cole's men caught him? What if she just found something worth caring about only to lose it? The questions circled in her mind like vultures, and she found herself watching the road obsessively, hoping to see him riding back. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Beatrice heard hoofbeats. She ran to the front of the house, relief flooding through her when she saw William approaching on his horse. But as he drew closer, her relief turned to alarm. His face was bruised, his lips split, and he was favoring his left side. What happened? She reached him as he dismounted, her hands instinctively going to his face to assess the damage. Got spotted, William said, wincing as he moved. 3 of Cole's men found me looking around their holding pens. They worked me over pretty good before I managed to get away. Did you find anything? Our cattle are there, I'm sure of it, but I couldn't get close enough to check the brands. He touched his ribs carefully. One of them got in a good kick, might be cracked. Come inside. Let me look at you properly. She led him into the house and sat him down at the kitchen table. Thomas appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening at William's condition. Thomas, get me hot water and clean cloths, Beatrice ordered, falling back on her practical nature despite her racing heart. "And fetch the medical kit." She carefully cleaned the cuts on William's face, her touch as gentle as she could make it. His eyes stayed on her face the whole time, and she found herself acutely aware of how close they were, of the intimacy of tending to his injuries. "This was foolish," she said quietly. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't, and now we know for certain Cole has our cattle. Knowing doesn't do us any good if we can't prove it." She dabbed at his split lip with a damp cloth. "Promise me you won't do anything that reckless again." "Can't promise that, B. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks." "The right thing is staying alive," she said fiercely. "I just found you, William. I can't lose you to some land dispute." His hand came up to cover hers, stilling her movements. "I'm not going anywhere. Takes more than a few bruises to get rid of me." "Those aren't just bruises. You might have broken ribs and your face looks terrible. Are you saying I'm not handsome anymore?" His attempt at levity was undermined by the grimace he couldn't quite hide. "I'm saying you're an idiot who doesn't know when to be careful." But her voice broke slightly on the words, betraying her fear. "Hey." William squeezed her hand gently. "I'm okay, I promise." Thomas cleared his throat from the doorway, reminding them both that they weren't alone. Beatrice stepped back quickly, taking the hot water and medical supplies from her brother. "Thomas, go see to William's horse. Make sure she gets fed and watered." After Thomas left, Beatrice continued her examination. William's ribs were badly bruised but probably not broken, though he'd need to take it easy for a few days to let them heal. The cuts on his face were superficial, more dramatic looking than dangerous. "You're lucky," she said finally. "It could have been much worse." "I know. And I'm sorry for worrying you. I should have been more careful." Benjamin returned from Silverton as Beatrice was finishing bandaging William's ribs. His face fell when he saw William's condition, and he listened grimly as William explained what had happened. "I'm sorry, son. I shouldn't have sent you there." "You didn't send me anywhere I didn't volunteer to go," William corrected, "and at least now we know." "Knowing isn't enough." Benjamin sank into a chair, looking defeated. "The bank refused to extend the loan. Said they've heard about our losses and consider us too much of a risk. We have until the end of September to catch up on payments, or they'll foreclose." The words fell like stones into still water, the ripples spreading outward to encompass all their fears. September was only 6 weeks away. With Cole still stealing their cattle, there was no way they could come up with the money in time. "There has to be something we can do," Beatrice said, but even she could hear the desperation in her voice. "There is," William said, though the look on his face suggested he didn't like the option. "We can sell to Cole. He's been wanting this land. He'd pay enough to clear the loan, probably enough to get you started somewhere else." "Absolutely not." Benjamin's voice was steel. "I won't reward that man's thievery by giving him what he wants. This ranch has been in the Lancaster family for 20 years. My wife is buried here. I won't abandon it." "Then we fight," William said simply. "We set a trap. We catch Cole or his men in the act. We get the proof we need to bring them to justice." "That's dangerous," Beatrice protested. "Look what they did to you just for snouting around. If we actively try to trap them, they could kill someone." "They're going to destroy us anyway if we don't do something," William pointed out. "At least this way we're taking action instead of just waiting to lose everything." Benjamin rubbed his face with both hands, the weight of decision pressing down on him. "Let me think about it. We've got some time still. Maybe something else will present itself." But as the days passed, no other options appeared. They continued working the ranch, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, but the threat hung over them like a storm that wouldn't break. William healed slowly, the bruises fading from purple to green to yellow. His ribs caused him pain, but he refused to slow down, insisting on doing his full share of work and more. Beatrice found moments alone with him when she could, stolen conversations while working side by side, brief touches that sent electricity through her whole body. They didn't speak much about what was growing between them, but it was there nonetheless, a constant undercurrent to everything else happening. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her breath catch, and she knew she looked at him the same way. 2 weeks after William's beating, they were repairing fence together in the north pasture. Thomas was helping Benjamin with the books back at the house, leaving Beatrice and William alone for the first time in days. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of labor something they'd both grown up with and found soothing. "Bae," William said finally, setting down his hammer, "there's something I need to say." She looked up from the post she was setting. "What is it?" "I know the timing is terrible. I know your family is dealing with this situation with Cole and the bank, and I don't want to add to the complications, but I can't keep quiet any longer." He moved closer, his eyes intense. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. I think about you constantly. When I wake up, my first thought is wondering if I'll see you at breakfast. When I'm working, I find excuses to be near you. At night, I lie awake thinking about your laugh, the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're concentrating, the strength in you that never seems to bend no matter what gets thrown your way." Beatrice's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. "William, You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens with the ranch, whatever the future holds, I needed you to know that these weeks here with you have been the best of my life. You've made me believe in possibilities again, made me want things I thought I'd given up on." "Like what?" "Like a home, a family, a future with someone I love and who loves me back. Simple things, but they seem like miracles when you're with the right person." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I know I'm just a hired hand with nothing to offer but hard work and a beat-up horse. I know you deserve better than that. But I love you, B, and I wanted you to hear me say it at least once." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "You think you have nothing to offer? William, you've given my family hope when we were running out of it. You've made my father smile again. You've been there every single day doing whatever needed to be done without complaint. And you've made me feel something I never thought I'd feel." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I love you too. I've been afraid to admit it even to myself, but I do. I love you." The kiss happened naturally, inevitably, as if they'd been building toward this moment since the night he'd made butter churning into a dance. His lips were gentle on hers despite the intensity of emotion between them, a question and an answer all at once. Beatrice's arms came up around his neck, and she felt his wrap around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, all the worry and fear and hope of the past weeks flowing into this single point of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, William rested his forehead against hers. "I probably should have asked permission to do that," he said. "Probably," Beatrice agreed, but she was smiling. "Are you going to apologize? Not even a little bit. Good." They held each other for a long moment, savoring this happiness they'd carved out of difficult circumstances, but reality intruded too soon, as it always did. They still had work to finish, and standing around embracing wouldn't get the fence mended. "We need to tell my father," Beatrice said as they returned to work. "About us. Are you sure, given everything else he's dealing with? He'll notice eventually. Better he hears it from us." She smiled at him. "Besides, he likes you, William. I can tell. He trusts you. That's not a small thing." That evening, after dinner, Beatrice asked her father to step outside with them. Thomas remained in the house, sensing something important was happening. The three of them stood on the porch in the cooling evening air, and Beatrice took William's hand in hers. "Papa, William and I have something to tell you." Benjamin looked at their joined hands, and a knowing smile crossed his face. "I wondered when you two would figure it out. I've seen the way you look at each other." Beatrice blinked in surprise. "You knew. I'm old, not blind. And I remember what it looked like when I was courting your mother. That same mix of joy and terror on your faces every time you're in the same room." He looked at William seriously. "You have feelings for my daughter." "Yes, sir. I love her. I know I should have spoken to you first, asked permission to court her properly. But things happened fast and—" Benjamin held up a hand. "William, you've proven yourself 10 times over since you arrived here. You work hard, you're honest, you care about this ranch and about my family. If my daughter wants to be with you, you have my blessing." He paused. "Though I hope you understand that any formal commitment will have to wait until we've resolved this situation with Cole. I won't see be married and then widowed if things turn violent." "I understand, sir, and I give you my word, I'll do everything in my power to protect this family and this ranch." "I believe you will." Benjamin clapped William on the shoulder. "Now let's talk about this trap you mentioned, because I think it might be our only option left." They spent the next hour planning. The idea was relatively simple: move most of their remaining cattle to the home pasture where they could be easily watched, but leave a small group in the far pasture as bait. They'd take turns keeping watch from a hidden position, and when Cole's men came, they'd catch them in the act and have proof for the sheriff. "It's risky," Benjamin acknowledged. "If they come in force, we could be outnumbered." "Which is why we need help," William said. "I heard in town there's a U.S. Marshal passing through Silverton. If we could get him to participate in the stakeout, we'd have legal authority on our side." "That might work," Benjamin said thoughtfully. "I'll ride to Silverton tomorrow, see if I can speak with him." The next day, Benjamin returned with cautiously good news. The marshal, a man named James Garrett, had agreed to help. He'd been investigating cattle rustling throughout the region and was interested in building a case against Garrett Cole, who he suspected of being behind multiple thefts. If the Lancasters could provide the opportunity to catch Cole's men in the act, the marshal would be there to make arrests. They set their plan in motion. 15 head of cattle were moved to the far pasture, enough to be tempting but not so many that the loss would completely destroy the ranch. Then they waited. Benjamin, William, Thomas, and Marshal Garrett took turns keeping watch from a sheltered position overlooking the pasture. Beatrice wanted to participate, but the men unanimously voted against it, citing danger. She argued fiercely, but eventually gave in when William privately asked her to stay safe for his sake. "I can't concentrate on watching for rustlers if I'm worried about you being in the line of fire," he'd said. "Please let us handle this." 3 nights passed with no activity. On the 4th night, with William and Marshal Garrett on watch, 5 riders appeared just after midnight. They moved quietly, professionally, cutting the cattle from the herd and beginning to drive them south. William and the marshal waited until the rustlers were clearly in the act of theft before emerging from hiding, the marshal identifying himself. "U.S. Marshal, you men are under arrest for cattle theft." What happened next occurred in a blur of chaos. The rustlers panicked and several went for their guns. Shots rang out in the darkness, the sound echoing off the mountains. William dove for cover behind rocks, returning fire while trying to track the movement of the rustlers. One of them went down, wounded but not dead. 2 others surrendered immediately. But the last 2 spurred their horses and fled, leaving their companions behind. Marshal Garrett secured the 3 captured men while William gave chase to the fleeing rustlers. He followed them for over a mile in the darkness, before losing their trail in a rocky area where the horse's tracks disappeared. Frustrated but knowing he'd done what he could, he returned to find the marshal had the situation under control. "These men will talk," Garrett said confidently, looking at the 3 captured rustlers. "And they'll lead us right back to whoever hired them. You did good work here, Dawson." By the time they returned to the ranch house with the prisoners, dawn was breaking. Beatrice ran out to meet them, her face pale with worry. She went straight to William, her hands running over him as if checking for injuries. "I'm fine," he assured her. "Not a scratch. It's over, B. We got them." Benjamin emerged from the house, relief written across his features. "Will they testify against Cole?" "Already started talking," Marshal Garrett confirmed. "They're hired guns from Denver. Cole paid them to harass smaller ranchers in the area, yours included. With their testimony and the evidence we have, I can get a warrant for Cole's arrest. The judge in Silverton will want to hear this case as soon as possible." True to his word, Marshal Garrett moved quickly. Within 2 days, Garrett Cole was arrested at his ranch. More stolen cattle were found on his property, including several head bearing the Lancaster brand. The case against him was overwhelming, and facing hard time in prison, Cole agreed to a settlement. He would sell his ranch, with the proceeds going to repay the ranchers he'd stolen from. The Lancasters received enough to not only pay off their bank loan, but to expand their herd back to where it had been before the rustling began. The cloud that had hung over the ranch lifted. Benjamin's spirits improved dramatically, and he threw himself into planning for the future with renewed energy. Thomas, freed from constant worry, returned to being a carefree 14-year-old, at least some of the time. And Beatrice felt like she could finally breathe again, like the weight pressing on her chest for months had suddenly disappeared. A week after Cole's arrest, William asked Benjamin formally for permission to marry Beatrice. They were sitting on the porch at sunset, the 3 of them watching the light fade from the sky. "Sir, I know I don't have much to offer yet, but I love your daughter more than anything in this world. I'll work hard every day of my life to provide for her, to make her happy, to be the husband she deserves. If you'll give your permission, I'd like to ask her to marry me." Benjamin studied the younger man for a long moment, then smiled. "William, you've proven yourself in every way that matters. You've got my permission and my blessing. Welcome to the family." "Thank you, sir. That means everything to me. Now get out of here and go propose properly." She's in the garden, pretending to weed but really waiting to see what I'd say. William found Beatrice exactly where her father had said, on her knees in the vegetable garden with dirt on her hands and anticipation written all over her face. He knelt down beside her, taking both her hands in his despite the soil. "Beatrice Lancaster, I don't have a ring yet. I don't have much of anything except a horse, some saved wages, and a heart that's completely yours. But I'm asking you anyway, because I can't wait another moment. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you, working beside you, building a future with you?" Tears streamed down Beatrice's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her there in the garden with the sun setting behind them and the mountains bearing witness. It was a kiss full of promise, of hope, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine just months before. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Silverton. The whole town turned out, as did neighboring ranchers who'd heard about the Lancasters' troubles and were grateful that Cole had finally been brought to justice. Beatrice wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years. Benjamin walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Thomas served as William's best man, so proud he could barely stand still. "Do you, Beatrice Rose Lancaster, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I do. And do you, William James Dawson, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. William pulled Beatrice close and kissed her soundly while the crowd cheered. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools, happiness radiating from them in waves. The celebration lasted long into the night. There was dancing and food and toasting the happy couple. At one point, someone called out asking how the two had met. Beatrice and William exchanged glances, then William explained. I found her churning butter by moonlight, he said, his arm around his new wife's waist. And I joined her and made it a dance. That's the most ridiculous meet cute I've ever heard, someone called out, laughing. Maybe so, Beatrice said, looking up at William with love in her eyes. But it's ours. They honeymooned for a week at a small cabin up in the mountains, borrowed from a friendly neighbor. It was a time of discovery and joy, of learning each other in new ways, of talking late into the night about their dreams for the future. William wanted to expand the ranch eventually, maybe buy some land adjacent to the Lancaster property. Beatrice wanted to start breeding horses, putting her skills with the animals to good use. They both wanted children, a whole houseful if they were blessed. I want our kids to grow up knowing they're loved, William said one night as they lay together watching the stars through the cabin window. I want them to have what I had before my father died, that sense of security and belonging. They will, Beatrice promised. We'll make sure of it. They returned to the ranch at the end of September, ready to start their life together in earnest. Benjamin had moved into the larger bedroom, insisting the newlyweds take the main room. Thomas had decorated it with wildflowers, his contribution to welcoming them home. It was a small gesture but touching, and it made Beatrice tear up. Fall turned to winter, and the first snow fell in early November. The ranch settled into winter routines, the cattle brought closer to the barns, the horses given extra feed against the cold. Beatrice and William worked side by side every day, their partnership extending far beyond romance into a true team. They challenged each other, supported each other, made each other laugh even on the hardest days. Benjamin's leg continued to improve with less stress and better care. Thomas shot up like a weed, growing 3 inches over the winter and eating them out of house and home, as teenage boys do. The ranch prospered despite the harsh weather, the cattle healthy and the horses thriving under Beatrice's careful management. In March, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told William first, pulling him aside after breakfast one morning with a smile she couldn't contain. I have news. We're going to have a baby. William's face went through a series of expressions so quickly she almost laughed. Shock, joy, fear, and overwhelming love all flickered across his features in the space of seconds. Then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around despite her protests. Careful. Put me down before you hurt the baby. Sorry. He set her down gently, then immediately knelt and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. Hello in there. This is your papa. I'm going to love you so much. William, you're being ridiculous. The baby can't hear you yet. Don't care. I'm talking to my child. He looked up at her, his eyes shining. We're going to have a baby, B. We're going to be parents. I know. Are you scared? Terrified? You? Out of my mind with fear. What if I'm a terrible mother? William stood and pulled her into his arms. Impossible. You're going to be amazing. Look how you've taken care of Thomas all these years, how you manage this whole ranch. A baby will be easy compared to wrangling cattle. I don't think it works that way. We'll figure it out together, like we do everything else. Their son was born in October of 1883, a healthy baby boy they named Benjamin Thomas Dawson, after both his grandfathers. Benjamin Lancaster cried when they told him the name, holding his grandson with infinite gentleness while the baby fussed and squirmed. "He looks like William," Benjamin said softly. "Same dark hair. But he's got your mother's nose, Bea. I'd recognize it anywhere." Little Ben, as they called him, proved to be a demanding infant. He wanted to eat constantly and didn't care for sleep, keeping his parents up at all hours. Beatrice was exhausted, overwhelmed by the reality of motherhood in a way she hadn't anticipated. William did everything he could to help, walking the baby at night, changing diapers, supporting Beatrice when she broke down in tears from sheer fatigue. "I don't know how to do this," she sobbed one night at 3 in the morning while Ben screamed inconsolably. "I don't know what he needs." "You're doing fine," William assured her, taking the baby so she could rest. "He's fed, he's changed, he's warm. Sometimes babies just cry." "It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong." "But what if something's the matter? What if he's sick?" "Then we'll handle it. Together. But B, I think he's just being a baby. A very loud, very demanding baby, but that's what they do." He bounced Ben gently, humming the same tune he'd hummed that night they danced around the butter churn. Gradually, miraculously, the baby's cries subsided. "How did you do that?" Beatrice asked in wonder. "Lucky guess. Or maybe he likes my singing." William grinned. "Or maybe he's just exhausted himself and was going to stop anyway. We'll never know." As the months passed, they found their rhythm as parents. Ben proved to be a happy, curious baby once he figured out sleeping through the night. He had William's dark hair and Beatrice's blue eyes, and he adored his Uncle Thomas, who doted on him shamelessly. The ranch continued to thrive. They expanded as planned, buying an adjacent 40 acres when it came up for sale. Beatrice started her horse breeding program, purchasing a fine stallion from a breeder in Denver. Within a year, they had their first foals, beautiful animals that showed promise of becoming excellent working horses. In the spring of 1885, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. Their daughter, Sarah Grace Dawson, was born that December, a tiny thing with William's dark coloring and a temperament far calmer than her brother's had been. Ben, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to touch her and help take care of her. "Gentle," Beatrice would remind him as he patted Sarah's head with chubby toddler hands. "Very gentle with baby sister." Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The ranch prospered year by year, allowing them to hire more help and take some of the burden off everyone's shoulders. Benjamin's health improved to the point where he could do light work again, though he was content to take a back seat and let William and Beatrice run things. Thomas, now 17, had grown into a capable young man who was talking about starting his own small spread someday. One evening in the summer of 1886, William and Beatrice sat on their porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. Ben chased fireflies while Beatrice held Sarah, now 6 months old and gurgling happily. "You know what I was thinking about today?" William asked, reaching over to take Beatrice's free hand. "What's that?" "That night I found you churning butter by moonlight. The night we danced like idiots and laughed like we didn't have a care in the world." He smiled at the memory. "That was the moment I started falling in love with you, I think. Watching you let go and just be joyful despite everything weighing on you. I remember, I thought you were crazy trying to make churning butter into a dance. Maybe I was crazy. Or maybe I just saw something in you that called to something in me. A kind of strength that didn't mean you couldn't also be light and free when the moment allowed for it." He squeezed her hand. "I wake up grateful every single day that I rode onto this ranch when I did." "Me too. Though I'll admit, that first night when you showed up I thought you might be a cattle thief. And I thought you might stab me with that pitchfork you were brandishing so enthusiastically." Beatrice laughed, the sound mixing with the evening birdsong and their children's laughter. Look at us now. Married, 2 beautiful children, a thriving ranch. Sometimes I can barely believe this is my life. Believe it. You earned every bit of happiness we have. William pulled her close, mindful of the baby between them. And we're going to have a whole lot more years of this ahead of us. Promise. Promise. I'm not going anywhere, Bea. This is where I belong. With you, with our family, on this land we've built together. As if to punctuate his words, Ben came running up to the porch, breathless and excited. Papa, Mama, I caught a firefly, see. He opened his chubby hands carefully to show them the blinking insect. William and Beatrice admired it appropriately, then encouraged him to let it go. They watched the firefly spiral up into the darkening sky, its light blinking in rhythm with hundreds of others across the valley. Papa, tell me again about how you and Mama met, Ben demanded, climbing onto William's lap. Again, I told you just last night. But I want to hear it again. Please. William glanced at Beatrice, who smiled and nodded. It had become Ben's favorite bedtime story. All right. Well, it was a dark night, and I was a lonesome cowboy riding through Colorado looking for work. As William spun the tale for their son, making it more adventurous with each retelling, Beatrice looked out at the land spread before them. The mountains stood eternal against the deepening sky, the same mountains that had witnessed her struggles and her triumphs. The same land her mother was buried in, the same dirt she'd worked with her hands since she was a child. But now, it meant something different. It wasn't just the place she'd been born, the responsibility she'd shouldered out of duty. It was home in a way it had never quite been before. Home because William was here. Home because her children were growing up in these mountains. Home because every inch of this ranch represented their shared work, their shared dreams, their shared life. Sarah began to fuss, and Beatrice shifted her, beginning to rock gently. The baby settled immediately, her small hand curling around Beatrice's finger with surprising strength. Such a tiny thing, but already so full of personality. Beatrice wondered what kind of woman Sarah would grow up to be, what dreams she'd chase, what challenges she'd face. And then, William was saying to Ben, his voice taking on a dramatic tone, I heard the most beautiful sound. A woman singing while she worked, her voice floating on the night air like magic. I wasn't singing, Beatrice interjected. I was humming at best. Let me tell the story my way, William said with mock severity. As I was saying, the most beautiful singing I'd ever heard. So naturally, I had to investigate. You thought we had rustlers, Ben said gleefully. He'd heard this story enough times to know all the beats. I did. But instead, I found your mama working in the moonlight, and I thought to myself, here's a woman worth knowing. And then you danced. Ben was bouncing with excitement now. And then we danced. Right there by the butter churn with the stars watching and the mountains listening. It was the best dance I've ever had. Better than at your wedding, different from our wedding. That was a dance for showing the whole world how much I loved your mama. This was just for us, a moment of joy stolen from worry and hardship. Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes, moved by the way William told their story. He turned a simple memory into something magical, a founding myth for their family. She supposed that's what love did. It transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, made the everyday moments into something worth cherishing and retelling. All right, young man, she said to Ben. Time for bed. Say goodnight to Papa. But I'm not tired, Ben protested, even as a yawn split his face. That yawn says otherwise. Come on, let's get you tucked in. She handed Sarah to William and took Ben's hand, leading him inside. As she helped him into his nightshirt and tucked him into bed, Ben looked up at her with serious eyes. Mama, when I grow up, will I find someone to dance with like you and Papa? Beatrice smiled. smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. "If you're lucky and you keep your heart open, yes. You'll find someone who makes you want to dance even when you're doing chores. I hope so. I want to be happy like you and Papa. We want that for you too, sweetheart, but that's a long time away. For now, you just focus on being a good boy and learning everything you can." "I will." "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, Ben, more than all the stars in the sky." She kissed his forehead and left him to sleep, returning to the porch where William still sat with Sarah. The baby had fallen asleep in his arms, her tiny mouth slightly open, completely at peace. William looked up as Beatrice approached, and the love in his eyes still took her breath away after all this time. "She's out," he whispered. "Should I put her down?" "Not yet. Let's just sit here a bit longer." Beatrice settled beside him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen around them. The ranch was quiet except for the usual evening sounds, cattle lowing in the distance, the creek murmuring over stones, an owl calling from the woods. Peace had settled over this land, hard-won and precious. "William," Beatrice said softly, "do you ever think about how different things could have been? If you hadn't stopped here that night, if you'd ridden past and found work somewhere else?" "Sometimes. But then I think about how we found each other exactly when we both needed it most. You needed help with the ranch and I needed a place to belong. Seems like fate to me." "You really believe in fate?" "I believe that some things are meant to be. I believe that you and I were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together." He looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms, meant to bring these beautiful children into the world and raise them with love and strength. "When did you become such a romantic?" "The moment I fell in love with you, you brought out parts of me I didn't even know existed." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For stopping that night, for staying, for making me laugh when I'd forgotten how. For loving me and my family and this ranch like they're your own." "They are my own, Bea. You're my wife, Ben and Sarah are my children, Benjamin and Thomas are my family, and this ranch is my home. I couldn't separate myself from any of it if I tried, and I have no desire to try." They sat there until Sarah began to stir, hungry and making it known. Beatrice took her inside to nurse while William did a final check on the livestock before bed. Later, lying together in the darkness with their children sleeping peacefully in the next room, Beatrice found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate night when the mare had been injured, through all the trouble with Cole and the rustlers, through their courtship and marriage and the birth of their children, it had been a wild ride. There had been moments of fear, times when she'd wondered if they'd make it through. But they had, stronger together than either could have been alone. "William," she whispered into the darkness, I'm glad you made butter churning into a dance." She felt him smile against her hair. "Me too, love, me too." The years continued to roll by with the changing seasons. They had one more child, another son they named Andrew, born in 1888. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Benjamin Lancaster lived to see his grandchildren grow, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1892 at the age of 65. Thomas eventually married a schoolteacher from Durango and settled on a piece of land not far from the main ranch, staying close to family. The children grew as children do. Ben inherited his mother's way with horses and his father's steady temperament. He eventually took over the horse breeding program, expanding it until Lancaster Dawson horses were sought after throughout Colorado. Sarah proved to have a head for numbers and a sharp business sense, managing the ranch's accounts and investments with impressive skill. Andrew, the youngest, combined his siblings' talents with an adventurous spirit that led him to briefly try working for the railroad, before returning home to the ranch he loved. William and Beatrice grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. The passion of their youth matured into something stronger, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared work, and unwavering commitment. They faced challenges together, droughts and harsh winters, sick livestock and financial uncertainties. But they also celebrated triumphs, successful seasons and healthy grandchildren, anniversaries marked by the whole family gathering to remember that night when everything had changed. On their 25th wedding anniversary, William surprised Beatrice by setting up a butter churn behind the barn, just like that first night. When she found it there in the moonlight, he was waiting. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. Beatrice laughed, the sound still as bright as it had been when she was 22. "You old fool. We're in our 50s now, too old for this nonsense. Speak for yourself. I can still dance around a butter churn." And they did, laughing and swaying in the moonlight while their children and grandchildren watched from the porch, creating new memories to add to the family story. William's hair had gone gray, and Beatrice's face bore the lines of a life well lived, but in that moment they were young again, falling in love under the Colorado stars. As they danced, Beatrice thought about everything they'd built together. The ranch that now supported 3 generations. The children they'd raised to be strong and kind. The community they'd helped build in Animas Forks and the surrounding area. It was a good life, a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving. "What are you thinking about?" William asked, his arms steady around her waist. "Everything. Nothing. How grateful I am for all of this." "Me too," he kissed her softly. "Though I'm most grateful for you, none of this would exist without you, Bea. We built it together." "Yes, together, always together." The music of their shared life played on, measured in seasons and harvests, in children's laughter and quiet evenings, in hard work and harder-won peace. They had started with nothing but hope in each other, and they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. When William passed away in 1915 at the age of 58, his heart finally giving out after years of hard work, Beatrice mourned him deeply, but not despairingly. She had been blessed with 30 years of marriage to a man who had loved her completely, who had made her laugh even in the darkest times, who had been her partner in every sense of the word. Their children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, and she took comfort in knowing that William's legacy lived on in them, in the ranch they still worked, in the values they held dear. She lived another 7 years, long enough to see all her children happily settled, long enough to know 17 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch and remember that night William had made butter churning into a dance. She could still hear the tune he'd hummed, still feel the joy that had bubbled up inside her like a spring finally breaking through rock. When Beatrice died peacefully in 1922 at the age of 62, surrounded by family, her last words were about William. "He's waiting for me," she said with perfect certainty. "I can hear him humming our song." They buried her next to him on the ranch they'd built together, under the mountains that had witnessed their love story. And if you listen carefully on summer nights when the moon is bright, some say you can still hear music drifting on the wind, the sound of 2 souls dancing together for all eternity, their love as enduring as the mountains themselves. The ranch passed to their children, and then to their grandchildren, remaining in the family for generations. The story of how William and Beatrice met, the tale of the cowboy who found a woman churning butter by moonlight and made it a dance, became family legend, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a simple story of 2 people who found each other when they needed it most, who built a life together through hard work and unwavering love, and who proved that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, romance and joy could flourish if you were brave enough to reach for it.